Okay, welcome back to Media Hitman. I'm your Media Hitman, Jonathon Narvey, founder of Mind Meld PR, and I have a special guest today, Claudia Culley. Welcome to the show. How
Yes,
are
thank
you?
you. I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really good. Busy at the
Mhm.
at the agency. But you had some big news that I'm having you on the show for a few reasons. Um Number one, you just had some coverage for the New York Times, some political coverage on the Canadian election. That's I maybe we'll get into that in a moment, but also I want to talk a little bit about your experience. You were editor-in-chief until yesterday for the Runner. I wanted to talk about your experience with journalism but let's just get into everyone's talking about this wacky Canadian election result
Yeah.
and the election that happened. And maybe you could talk about your experience. First of all, how did you even get this opportunity with the New York Times? Like that doesn't just get handed to you, or
Oh,
did
I
it?
know. Well, yeah, no, great question. I mean, yeah, this week has been crazy. It was being able to do some reporting for the New York Times. I'm still kind of in disbelief about it. When I was doing the reporting, I definitely felt like I had imposter syndrome, like, oh, I can't, this isn't really real, but it was. So, yeah, I'm really grateful to one of my instructors. So, yes, I just graduated from KPU in their journalism degree program. One of the instructors in the program, Tracy Sherlock, she's a stringer for the New York Times for Vancouver. So she does a lot of Vancouver based reporting for them. So, if they need an interview or any sort of materials for a story, she's their go to person. And so it just so happened that Tracy wasn't able to do election coverage for Canada's federal election on April 28th. She was going to be away. And so she reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in filling in for her. And so, of course, I said yes, because look, what an incredible opportunity. So, yeah, very grateful to her for reaching out to me and, yeah, just giving me this opportunity. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun being able to do that. I went to two polling stations in Vancouver and I spoke with several different people. It was really interesting learning about different people's opinions with the election. I will say that compared to previous federal elections, I do think that people were really passionate and there was a lot of emotion in this election. And I really felt that with chatting with people. Um, Sometimes I think people don't necessarily want to be super open and talk about politics. Like sometimes people want to keep their political opinions a little bit, secret or just aren't very comfortable speaking about that openly with others. But I really felt that people were interested in speaking to me and speaking to the media about political parties and who they wanted to support and what they were concerned about. Because I think just with everything going on in the world right now, and then of course what's happening in the States, I think our federal elections were very emotionally charged in a way, and people felt very strongly about the parties that they wanted to support or were opposed to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lot going on with the election, and I can imagine, especially, I think you were talking to a lot of young people, maybe around the campus, that were, maybe they're worried about the Trump tariffs, but it's been 10 years of economic. We're not exactly where we were 10 years ago. I think we were like
Yeah.
fifth or eighth, and then I noticed that. Croatia is ahead of us on the standard of living index. And if you
Okay.
think
Yeah.
it's unfair to pick on Croatia, I'm not picking on them. Like clearly if they're doing better than us, that's awesome for them. But I remember when I was younger, we sent over peacekeepers to Croatia because there was a bloody civil war over there. And they're doing better than us now.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Great. Mhm.
so, uh, so anyways, I saw you had some commentary from I don't know how many people you talked to and how many people are featured in the New York Times coverage. I saw the one young guy was talking about he's worried about the future, and I think about the trend with young people for as long as I've been around has typically been, if you're young and you vote conservative, you have no heart, and if you're older, and you vote liberal, you have no brain. And then I think the new thing is if you're young and vote conservative, you have no money. So
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you need like everyone, it's like where's the opportunity? Where's the so I don't know that there's I'm what was your take on all this?
Yeah, so I spoke to five people. Five people agreed to do interviews with me.
Mm, mm,
Um, Out of those people, three of them were younger, so under 30, and then the other two were older than 30. The people who spoke to me, though, that were under 30, all of them were concerned about mainly housing. So the one person I spoke to, which did get published, his main concern was about the future and about housing,
mhm,
and he voted conservative. And then another lady I spoke to who was about 30 years old, she voted NDP, but she was also concerned about housing more so with tenants and sort of rights for tenants and that
mm,
sort of thing. So different approaches, I guess, to housing or different concerns when it comes to housing. But that was definitely a concern when I was speaking to young people was the our financial climate in Canada and what is going to be what opportunities they will have as they continue to age to, be financially stable. So I think that's definitely on young people's minds when they were voting in this election. And I guess their values or what they saw as important aligned with different parties.
mm,
Um, but yeah, and then in terms of people who I spoke to who were above 30, they had different concerns, not so much to do with housing, a lot more concerns about tariffs,
mm,
and also just having someone in power who will be able to fix the economy. But it didn't have to do with like housing or anything like that. I think just having some more stability in the country. So yeah, different concerns definitely between age groups. Mhm.
mm. Yeah, it did really seem like there was a huge divide between the age groups, and it's like, yeah, I think a lot of people have summed it up as it's the boomers versus the young generation election, and I don't know the boomers. The Boomers won. I don't know what they think they've won. Um, but I'm sure, it's not entirely true. Like some young people voted NDP, some voted Liberal, and they're
Yeah.
going to get exactly that. We'll see what happens in the coming days. So
Mhm.
that's really interesting. Did you notice, like there was some interesting things that happened on the media front during this election?
Mhm.
Like, this is a little bit different from what happened in the USA, where you had, the main candidate from the conservative side of things, that Donald Trump, who was, on podcasts and giving long form interviews of 2 or 3 hours, and then you had Kamala Harris. I think she was on the Call Me Daddy podcast, and that was like
Yeah.
I can't remember who else. It was like a couple of little pieces here and there, but mostly avoided media.
Mhm.
And here, the main conservative candidate seemed to largely avoid independent media. He did a few things. I think he's been on Jordan Peterson's podcast like 3 or 4 times, but nobody else's.
Mhm.
And I think he got some criticism for that. But
Yeah.
Mark
Mhm.
Carney also seemed to want to play to friendly media, and was very choosy. I don't know if he went to a lot of independent media. And then independent media in Canada is like there's kind of there's a different connotation here than in the USA, because
Mhm.
their media landscape is I think mostly for profit. Like there's NPR, and I think that might be it. I don't know. But whereas here, I think it's like a third of all journalism jobs in Canada are paid for by the government.
Mhm.
And the subsidies have been very generous from the current ruling party, except for things like Rebel News, Counter Signal, Juno News. They
Mhm.
tend to be right wing, and they don't get a lot of love from Ottawa.
Mhm.
Have you noticed sort of how did the media landscape affect the election, or vice versa?
Yeah, I think when I think about the US elections,
Hmm.
being a young person and I'm on social media, I'm on TikTok all the time and I would see a lot of stuff with Kamala Harris on TikTok and I felt like she was really catering to that younger generation.
Mm.
Um, Kind of like hopping on trends, not being so serious all the time, kind of having fun, where, that wasn't the case with Donald Trump. But here in Canada, I think both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre were not like they weren't really catering to young people too much, I don't think either with their campaign. Where Jagmeet Singh, he was on TikTok all the time. He'd like come up on my feed and he'd do, I remember once I saw he did a get ready with me video and he was tying his turban and he was talking about I think it had to do with housing or something. I could be wrong or I could have forgotten, but I think that throughout his campaign he was really catering to the younger generations and hopping on our social media platforms and kind of using that as a way to get out to people.
Mm.
Where I do think Pierre Poilievre definitely stuck more to traditional media outlets.
Mm.
And then Mark Carney, maybe a mix of both. But
Right.
yeah, each party leader I felt definitely tried to connect with Canadians through different media outlets. And maybe that had to do with their main supporter base and trying to find ways to connect with their supporters through the media that they're taking in, or trying to connect with people who maybe haven't decided which party they want to choose, like young people who are still newly maybe now they're now able to vote in the federal election and they want to learn about which party they support and who they
Mm.
want to vote for. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot to dig into there.
Mm.
There was that funny bit about Jagmeet Singh. Like I followed election coverage. I can't say I think I probably followed it more than your average Canadian. I don't really get into. I don't care about typically what's happening in a particular riding. I don't
Yeah.
know who's the MP representing this or that area, but I pay attention to policy and who's the main leader. Jagmeet Singh, for those American members of the audience who don't know who that is, like he's the head of the NDP, the New Democrat Party, the Socialist Party, effectively of Canada. Although I think the Liberals basically ate their lunch this time again. So they got all the lefties as well,
Mhm.
and good on them. They won. But the NDP in the media, like the to me, what I noticed, because I'm not on TikTok, I'm not on Instagram.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm too much of a boomer. Um, the only coverage I saw of Jagmeet during the whole campaign, I think this was maybe it was that he was on some podcast with some OnlyFans influencer who was wearing a keffiyeh. So,
Mhm.
uh, what's his name? Writer for I forget his name. He used to write for the National Post, maybe he still does. Can't remember the name. He pointed out, they probably got like 100% of the porn addicted Hamasnik vote. But like I don't know how big that constituency is.
Yeah.
Apparently not enough to, help them get official party status again because they
No.
lost a
Yeah.
lot of votes. That was such a weird, like, I don't know. This is interesting developments in independent media.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. Hmm.
So, all right. So candidates are going towards the media they think is going to help them win. Do you think it was a mistake for, like Polyev, the conservative candidate, seemed to have this in the bag a few months
Yeah.
ago. Did he blow this lead partly because he didn't go on the big podcast? And it would probably be American podcasts that he would have had to go on because those have the reach. I don't know that
Mhm.
there's a ton of Canadian podcasts that have like this is the dirty secret that a lot of Canadians maybe don't like to fess up to, but I think we mostly watch American media more than we watch Canadian media, just because the media landscape is so much bigger. There's so many more personalities and they speak the exact same language, and they're
Yeah.
dealing with a lot of the same issues that we deal with. But I mean, it's a double-edged sword because they're not Canadians are not Americans, and so a lot of American culture sort of the good and the bad sort of comes over here, and we start talking about things that maybe don't affect us actually. Maybe we should be talking about other things. I don't know if you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think I think what you were saying earlier about how, the conservatives pretty much had the election in the bag, or so it seemed, and
Mhm.
then, Justin Trudeau stepped down and Mark Carney
Mhm.
took up leader of the Liberal Party. I think it's it's quite crazy that the Liberals won the election when, 3 months ago it seemed like they had no shot. And one of the main trends that I noticed online among young people was initially no one was a fan of the Liberal Party because everyone was frustrated, especially the young people, with the economy. And you know especially in BC, there's like no way a young person could rent a house or buy a property unless they receive help from their parents or family or something like that, because rent is so expensive. You would never be able to save up enough money to put a down payment on something, and it would take you years pretty much, unless you get like a crazy high paying job. So I think actually the American elections, and I think Donald Trump kind of scared some young people away from voting conservative, because I think that they saw, okay, the Conservative Party is Canada's right wing party. Oh no, I'm scared of right wing politics because I don't love what I'm seeing in the States. And so that kind of, and now, oh, the Liberal Party has a new leader now, so things will be different. And so that sort of swayed them to vote Liberal.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's really interesting in general how much Canadians, as you said, we really do take in a lot of American content. Like I remember during the American elections, everyone was just like so obsessed with what was happening, and we all wanted to be in the know about, what was going to happen. It was like almost as big of a deal as our own federal elections, even though it's not our, we don't live there, it's not our country. But um I think, yeah, because of all of that, yeah, I think it definitely has, what happens in America has a huge effect on in Canada.
Mhm.
And we take in so much American media content, both just like online social media stuff like podcasts, entertainment, but then also news as well. And so I think that Canadians are super influenced by the States in so many different ways and may not even realize it or want to own up to it. But yeah, I think
Well,
that answered your question. I don't know, but
yeah, oh, absolutely you did.
yeah,
And yeah, we're hyper focused on that. Like you can see the guys behind me. They're checking out American news right now.
they
They're
are.
they're not even moving. You can see
Yeah.
they're so
They're
focused.
so focused. Yes, very
Um
concentrated.
so oh, I last question around the election stuff. I wanted to get in a little bit into the editor-in-chief role that and your experience in student journalism and journalism in general. Um
Yeah.
but I did have a final question just around the people you were interviewing. You mentioned, some young people were still put off or were put off by the Trump thing. That might have changed their vote.
Mhm.
Did you notice, like we also talked about the difference in age groups, like certainly different voting preferences for older Canadians versus younger Canadians. And the younger ones skewing conservative, the older ones tending to go liberal.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, what about men and women, gender? So, like, yeah, did you notice a big disparity, or was it pretty much the same for men and women that you talked to?
Mhm. Um, so I think in terms of the people I spoke to on election day, I think that it more so had to do with age, specific, like as we already discussed. The women I did speak to, all of them were voting either liberal or NDP, and the one older gentleman who I spoke to was also voting liberal. So it was just the one younger man that I spoke to who was voting conservative.
Hmm.
But online, throughout like the entire election period, and just the sort of discourse I've seen on social media is a lot more women are wanting to vote like liberal or NDP. And a lot of that conversation I've heard has to do with women's rights and reproductive rights. And I think because of what's happened in the States with like the overturn of Roe versus Wade
Mm.
and all of that, some women are, even in Canada, are really worried about their own rights and also rights of LGBT, to us LGBTQ plus folk. And that's sort of where their concern is at. And I think that
Mm.
they're maybe a little bit worried that a right-winged government would sort of affect women's rights and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that would, necessarily fully be the case.
Yeah.
Um, but I did see that sort of conversation happen amongst women. And so because of that, they were taking to more to left-winged parties instead,
Right.
where men might not have those same concerns. And so they're not thinking about those types of rights,
Mm.
even though they should be. But so I think that wasn't really, maybe for some men, that wasn't top of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for all men, but my hunch is, and just from what I see in the world, the vast majority of men are totally down with abortion. They're like, you want to, and it's not because we're fans necessarily. It's not like because we're all ultra feminists on the inside. It's most men, maybe most men, maybe a lot of men. Let's say a lot of men like the idea of all fun, no responsibility. Uh,
Hmm.
and so it's kind of sad and pathetic, but that's kind of where it comes from this side. I mean, it's funny the liberals, the NDP, they will bring up the abortion thing every election, usually when the polls start looking a little dicey for them.
Yeah.
And I remember this going back to the Stephen Harper days and before, like it's just been the conservatives say that it's a settled question, like we're not getting into this every
Yeah.
time. And it's like no one believes them. No one trusts them on this. It's like I don't know if they have to take a blood oath or what the deal is, but they are not you know again, I think this goes back to something you alluded to or you discussed earlier. There's a bit of, I don't know if I wouldn't call it confusion, but conflating with Republicans and conservatives.
Yeah,
Because,
definitely. Hmm.
yeah, like I see conservatives in Canada were basically 90s Democrats or something like that. Like, or a conservative in Canada is to the left of a lot of folks. But anyways, I'm not here to defend those guys. I'm just sort of, I do notice how that issue gets discussed in the media, and it's like, okay,
Yeah. Hmm.
why take someone at their word for this policy and not for that policy? I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's
No,
just how it goes.
definitely. Yeah.
Um, okay. I suppose I've probably shown my stripes a little bit in this conversation. I'm sure people can guess how I voted or probably voted. Do you have a sense? Yeah, this is the last Canadian election question for you. From the people you discussed. Who were voting NDP, voting Liberal. What positive things, or are they hoping for or looking for from the newly elected government?
Hmm. I, it's interesting you bring that up because the majority of people who I spoke to who were voting either Liberal or NDP,
Hmm.
the main reasons they gave for voting for those parties was because they were scared of what would happen if the Conservatives got in. So,
Hmm.
um, especially one person I spoke to said, "Oh, I'm voting for the Liberal because I don't want Pierre Poilievre to get in, or I'm voting NDP because well, the one person I spoke to who was voting NDP, it was because it had to do with the specific MPs in her riding, and she liked those MPs more than the Liberal MPs. She said that she was going to vote Liberal, and then she looked into the actual who the MPs were, and she didn't agree with them or their values too much, so she voted NDP just because she liked those the candidates in that riding more. Anyways, but the people who I spoke to who were voting liberal were concerned about the Conservative Party. They didn't want the Conservative Party to get in. They said the election, some of the people I spoke to said like they want to keep um, keep it democratic in here, protect Canada from the states, like protect or work to battle against the tariffs. So it was a lot more of a people who were voting liberal, from what I heard from them, seemed like they were doing it to try to protect Canada from more right-winged politics from infiltrating the government. That's
Mhm.
sort of the vibe that I was getting from a
Yeah.
lot of people. Yeah.
Okay. So it was fear versus hope, and it seems like maybe fear won out this time. Huh?
Yes, that's definitely what I was getting. It was more of a preventative type vote than a we want to see this sort of change happen. So, which is interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, let's talk a little bit about. So you just left your editor-in-chief role at the Runner yesterday, I think it was.
Yes. Yeah. Yesterday was my last day. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that experience, or a lot about that experience. Actually, starting with maybe this is a more interesting question. Let's get into the background before we get into the new of you leaving and your next steps.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, you're a young person who chose to go into journalism, chose to learn the craft of journalism, of newsmaking, and what influenced this decision? Why did you become a journalist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went into university right out of high school, and I think most people, when we're in high school, you're 17, 18, you're still so young and trying to figure out who you are and what you actually like and what you're passionate about. And you might not, most people do not have that figured out when you're that age. And so I had to think about the things that I enjoyed in school, like the skills that I liked and the things that I was good at, but that I also really did enjoy doing. And so I remember talking to my mom about it, and I've always liked writing. I really like photography as well, and digital media as well. So I like filming videos, editing videos, and all of these sorts of skills are all part of journalism. I've always liked storytelling. And so I was like, okay, like let's give journalism a try. And so I enrolled at KPU for their Bachelor of Journalism degree. And I remember when I first started the degree in my first year, I was very like, do I really want to do this? Because I started to learn more about how challenging journalism is and how, if you search up like what are the most stressful jobs in the world, being a journalist is like in the top 10, if
Mm,
not the top five. It is a very stressful position because news never stops. Like you're constantly working. A lot of journalists are overworked, and you have to report on really challenging stories sometimes and hold people in positions of power accountable, which can be scary and hard and results in a lot of backlash. And so I've always found that I'm not like the most extroverted person. And so, sometimes I feel a little bit anxious in some social situations. I'm not introverted. There's a word for the when you're in between, when you're kind of, I think it's like omniverted. I don't remember. Anyways, but so I remember when I first started my degree, at times I was like, oh, like, am I really cut out for this? Like, even having to reach out to people to conduct interviews, I was like, this is so nerve-wracking. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, when I first started, I was 18. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing or if I'm asking the right questions. Like, how do I go about navigating and directing this conversation? But I kind of decided to see it through because I was like, I like what I'm doing. Like, I like writing, I like being able to take photos. Um, and so I kind of overcame those challenges, like those things that I was a little bit worried about or thought that I wouldn't be good at. I just sort of kept pushing myself throughout my degree to just do it. And then, you become more comfortable with those things that you're anxious or worried about or feel nervousness around. And so, yeah, now I'm really grateful that I did do my journalism degree. I love journalism. I love writing, and I love the storytelling aspect of it. I love being able to tell people stories, whether that be through a written piece or a video piece or even photography. So, yeah, it's been interesting though throughout the program because the journalism landscape has definitely been changing, in the past 10 years with um, print media, dying and everything's going online. And then almost 2 years ago, Bill C-18, the Online News Act, came into effect, which is affecting a lot of smaller newspapers. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting field to be in, that's for sure.
Hmm. You talking about your experience, it sort of got me thinking back to, I think I had some of the same reasons for getting into journalism in the first place. I mean, I never hit the big lights of, let's say, the Globe and Mail or the CBC. I did a lot of writing for community newspapers, North Shore News. I was their politics guy, but like I would cover city council meetings at District of West Vancouver or North Vancouver District or North Vancouver City Hall. And so I kind of I played it straight. I would go to meetings and just sort of record what I heard and try to put together 6 to 8 stories over the course of the evening and have send those to my editor by 9 a.m. when I would go to sleep. Um, and I think I was probably okay at that style of journalism, but I think I had a little bit of, you know, not shyness, but maybe I wasn't like the hard-assed, hard-nosed, like sort of you think of a reporter who's also like part private detective type thing. Like if there was any schemes or like bribes or anything going on in the background that I didn't know about, there was like 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5 years where they could have gotten away with anything because I wasn't looking into it. I would show up at city hall meetings and just sort of do the
Yeah.
job, but not. I don't know. I probably wasn't sniffing about for corruption and things like that, and like holding power accountable, holding people accountable. It's like I don't know. I don't like getting on people's nerves. So
Yeah.
maybe that
Yeah.
wasn't the
Yeah.
right fit. And so a lot of business journalism and tech journalism is frankly positive stories like, oh,
Yeah.
funding round, or you just launched this product. Oh, what does that do? That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
So there's a little less, um, I don't know, controversy, conflict. Um,
Backlash, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My biggest scoop that it was for Beta Kid, which is a technology publication in Canada. I guess I think the biggest one in the nation. And my biggest scoop was totally inadvertent. Like the founder of Uber, Travis Kalanick, sort of casually mentioned they were losing like $1 billion a year in
Wow.
China, and I wrote it down, threw it into the story. I didn't think anything of it, and then it started getting quoted in story in like CNN and all the rest. Anyways, I'm not getting into that to like brag about my old times. It's sort of like I think I don't know. There's what makes for a good journalist in then or I guess in 2025. Like what do you think? You mentioned a few different areas where maybe you're concerned about the future of journalism in Canada or more broadly throughout the world, what the trends are, where the industry is going. Maybe you could speak more to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think what makes a good journalist, like in this day and age, um, because I mean, this has been the case for like a little while now, but there's so much competition always like with news about, breaking the story first. And there's so many, now it's like very easy to access news online. And so, kind of whatever media outlet gets to it first, like that's what people are going to see first. So, I think though, what makes a good journalist is someone who is very, oh, what's the word? kind of like a go-getter in a sense, like someone who's ambitious and trying to always seek out the stories, like seek out the stories that are different or find an angle on the thing that everyone's talking about, but something that makes it slightly different. So you're not just repeating the same story as all the other news outlets are. So kind of looking for those things that are going to stand out and be different, and being able to like find time to dig into things, and kind of being a little bit of like, a private investigator or as you said, like an investigator, like looking into things and breaking those big stories. um, and I think also someone who's able to multitask and take on a large workload, because I've heard that a lot of newsrooms aren't receiving the same funding as they used to. So there's less funding, but so there's fewer jobs, but the same amount of news still needs to be reported and shared with everyone. So a lot of journalists are taking on more responsibilities, more stories, more tasks daily than like they would have been, I don't know, like 20 years ago for sure. And so being able to manage all of these things and stay on top of things. Um, so yeah, I would say that someone who's just has a lot of energy and is able to work at a high pace, work on tight deadlines, and think sort of outside of the box. Um, in that sense, I think it could be very easy to get burnout if you're like pushing yourself that much in a job. But um, yeah, I would say that. Mhm.
So, all right, this has been a wonderful discussion of one of the biggest political news stories around, and people are still talking about the Canadian election, and we're talking about the state of journalism. Um, I have one final question on the state of journalism, actually,
Yeah.
just on the technology front, AI. I know that some outlets have taken tentative steps, in some cases, very big steps into incorporating AI into the creation of news. And this hasn't really gone over really well in a lot of examples. Maybe you could speak to that, like just sort of how do writers, journalists in general sort of cope with AI or use AI to the fullest to uh, sort of change, improve how the news gets gathered.
Yeah, I think AI is so interesting in every industry
Hmm.
because, like, in every way, AI can be abused, but then it can also be used as a tool to help enhance and make your work so much better. So, when I was at the Runner, I did introduce a policy about AI because I think we were having cases where I could tell that some people were submitting stories completely written by AI, which is not acceptable. Because in journalism, the work should be completely authentic, factual, and original work as well. Like you don't want to just be repeating things or um, like for an opinion story or anything like that, for example. It should all be authentic and original work. So I think people right now too don't fully trust AI. Like some people do, some people don't. Like I think it's a very person to person thing.
Mhm.
So especially with something like journalism, people want to be able to know that they can trust journalism and they can trust the news stories that they're writing. So I think if they hear that, oh, we used AI to help write that article, and even if it was used as a tool, even to help maybe gather some research or fact check and like make sure that everything is correct, and you only used AI for that sort of purpose,
Hmm.
people might be a little bit skeptical even about that reporting because AI may have been used in it. So I think it's interesting. I think AI is one of these newer technologies that a lot of people are embracing and I think should embrace because it's going to be, it's part of the future and it's like part of our world now. So it's important and it's a great tool like when used properly. So I think there's people who are on board to embracing it, and then there's others who are very skeptical about AI and, don't want to embrace it or try using it. So
Hmm.
it's interesting, how it plays out in journalism. But I definitely do think that it can be a really great tool for journalists to fact check their work or even find credible pieces of research that are online. So, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, we're still testing out how we use it, and I think thing on the PR side of things for Mind Meld PR. There's still a lot of confusion, like amongst not necessarily clients, but let's say prospects who are kicking our tires and maybe they're interested in PR services.
Mhm.
I've had a few conversations that went kind of like, so the thing you do is you'll come up with a story angle and then put that into Chat GPT or Grok, and it'll churn out an article, and you send that to a reporter, and they put their name on it, and that goes in the newspaper. That's how that works. And I'm like, okay, let's talk through this.
Yeah.
No. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but actually, there's other. I think there's even amongst clients, like we've got some clients who definitely over rely on AI, and like we'll see this in other elements of their marketing. Like there's a few even current clients that I haven't called them out on it, but I'm very suspicious and that like all the articles I'm seeing on their blog they look like they're written by AI
Mm.
because I mean just from a quality standpoint, like it looks like I if I had hired an intern to write this thing, it's like it wouldn't be this vague and generic and boring. Like
They all have a vibe. AI written pieces have the same sort of,
hmm.
there's something about it where you can tell it doesn't have that human touch, I'd say.
Yeah, totally, totally. So we'll see how this goes, how the how we interact with technology. It's a moving target.
Mhm.
Okay. Claudia Culley, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today about
Yes, you too.
yeah, yeah. Um I guess my last question for you is what's next for you after after the runner? What do you where do you see yourself in, I'm not going to say 5 years,
Like
but
that, I don't like that question.
like what's the yeah, that's the worst question. What's the trajectory that you'd like to go on from here?
Yeah, I think, I'm now that I'm graduated and I'm done my time at the student newspaper, the runner, I'm on the job hunt and I'm trying to find work that has to do with storytelling, regardless if that's ends up being journalism or if it's communications or even public relations. I've learned throughout my education that storytelling is what I'm passionate about. I like being able to tell other people's stories and communicate that with a larger audience. Like that brings me a lot of fulfillment, I think, and being able to help support, a person or a client or someone. I think that brings me a lot of satisfaction. So I'm gonna hopefully try to do that in a way. What by whatever means that is, or whatever opportunities that presents itself in. So that's my goal. And then going down the road, I love video documentaries and I love video storytelling. So maybe one day I could try putting together my own video documentary as like a side project. I don't know if that'll happen, but I have some goals, or I have a direction that I want to go in. So yeah.
Well, your future looks very bright. Thank you for coming on Media Hitman.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.